The African man saved me, but then he did this to me. I never imagined my life would come down to this, captured, bound, and at the mercy of an unknown tribe in the heart of Africa. One moment, I was just another American adventurer exploring the vast wilderness. The next, I was dragged into a world where survival was uncertain, and every breath could be my last. At first, I thought they were going to kill me. Their warriors surrounded me, their faces unreadable, their language foreign to my ears. I had no idea why I was being held prisoner, only that I was completely powerless. But then, he appeared. His name was Kato. Strong, fearless, and completely unlike the others. There was something in his dark, piercing eyes, something that told me he saw me differently. While the others treated me as nothing more than a captive, he hesitated. He watched me, and when no one else was looking, his touch lingered just a second too long. I should have feared him. Instead, I found myself drawn to him. What I didn't know was that Kato had a secret, a dangerous one, and before I could understand what was happening, he had already changed my fate forever. He did something unthinkable. He helped me escape. But the truth was, I didn't just run from the tribe. I ran from something much more dangerous, the fire between us, the undeniable connection that neither of us could explain. And just when I thought I was free, just when I thought I had left it all behind, he found me again. What he did next? I never saw it coming. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of this emotional, heart-pounding story. This is about passion, survival, and a love that defies every rule. Are you ready? I never thought my life would come down to this. Hands tied behind my back, feet dragging against the dirt as I was pulled deeper into the jungle. My mind was hazy from the struggle, my body sore from the blows I had taken. The last thing I remembered was wandering too far from my group, the sharp crack of movement in the bushes before they came. Now, all that remained was the rhythmic sound of my captor's footsteps and the thick, humid air pressing against my skin. The men surrounding me moved with effortless precision, their bodies painted with dark markings, their muscles tensed with years of survival and discipline. They spoke in low voices, a language I didn't understand, but I could feel their suspicion, their curiosity. I wasn't one of them, and in their eyes, I was a threat, or something worse. As the jungle opened into a hidden village, I felt every eye on me. Women whispered, children clung to their mothers, and the warriors who had captured me remained unreadable. Fires crackled, casting eerie shadows against the clay huts, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and something unfamiliar. Then, I saw him. He stood slightly apart from the others, tall, broad-shouldered, his deep brown skin glowing under the firelight. His dark eyes locked onto mine, intense and searching. Unlike the others, he didn't look at me with hatred or fear, but with something else, something I couldn't name. Before I could make sense of it, I was forced to my knees before the village elders. Their presence was overwhelming, their voices deep and powerful as they debated my fate. Though I didn't understand their words, I knew what they were discussing: life or death. Then, the man who had caught my eye spoke. His voice was smooth but firm, his words carrying weight. The elders listened, some nodding, others frowning, but his confidence never wavered. Finally, after a long, tense silence, the oldest among them gestured for me to be taken away. I didn't know what he had said, but whatever it was, it had saved me. I was shoved into a hut, my heart still racing. The dim space smelled of earth and smoke, the only light coming from a small fire in the corner. My wrists burned from the ropes, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Then footsteps. The entrance lifted, and he stepped inside. The warrior, the one who had spoken for me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air between us thick with unspoken tension. Up close, he was even more intimidating, strong, confident, utterly unreadable. Finally, he broke the silence. His English was accented but clear. "You are safe, for now." I swallowed hard. "Why did you help me?" His eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. "I do not know." Then, without another word, he turned and left, leaving me alone with a truth I wasn't ready to face. I should have feared him. Instead, all I could think about was him. The night was long. I could hear the faint murmurs of the tribe outside, the crackling of the fire, the distant sound of drums beating in a slow, steady rhythm. Sleep didn't come. My body ached, my wrists throbbed from the tight ropes they had bound me with earlier, and my mind was caught in an endless loop of questions. Why had they taken me? What were they planning to do? And more than anything, why had he saved me? The warrior with the piercing dark eyes, the one who had spoken for me when he didn't have to, the one who had looked at me like he saw something different. I didn't even know his name. The hut was small, dimly lit by the dying glow of embers in a fire pit. I shifted against the rough mat beneath me, my muscles tight with tension. Outside, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then the entrance lifted. He stepped inside, his presence immediate, overwhelming. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His gaze flickered over me, assessing. He seemed to be studying me, reading something in my face that I wasn't sure I even understood myself. Then he crouched down beside me, his movements fluid, effortless. Up close, I could see the sharp angles of his face, the way the firelight danced against his skin, highlighting the deep brown of his eyes. "My name is Kato," he said, his voice calm but firm. I swallowed. "Daniel?" He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. There was another pause before he reached for something at his side, a small wooden bowl filled with a thick, earthy-smelling paste. Without asking, he dipped his fingers into it and gently took my arm. I tensed. "Wounds," he explained. "This will help." I should have pulled away, should have told him I didn't need his help. But his touch was careful, almost gentle as he spread the paste over the bruises on my wrists. The cool sensation soothed the sting, and against my better judgment, I let myself relax. "Why did you speak for me?" I asked after a moment. Kato didn't answer right away. His fingers slowed against my skin, his jaw tightening slightly. "You do not belong here," he said at last. "But they do not know what to do with you." I exhaled. "And you do?" His eyes met mine, steady and unreadable. "No." The way he said it, like he hated not knowing, sent a shiver through me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air between us was heavy with something unspoken, something neither of us was willing to name. Finally, Kato pulled away, standing to his full height. "Rest," he said simply. "You will need strength." Then, before I could ask him what that meant, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me with nothing but my racing thoughts, and the realization that somehow, despite everything, he was the only person in this place I trusted. The morning came with the golden glow of the rising sun filtering through the cracks in the hut's walls. The distant hum of the village waking up filled the air, voices murmuring, footsteps padding against the dirt, the occasional laugh of children running past. It was almost peaceful, if not for the constant weight pressing down on my chest. I was still a prisoner. I sat up slowly, my body still sore from the rough handling the day before. My wrists felt better, thanks to the strange paste Kato had applied, but my mind was anything but settled. Then, as if my thoughts had summoned him, he entered. Kato stepped inside, his movements as fluid as ever, his dark eyes scanning me as if he was assessing my condition. I didn't know why, but his presence had a strange effect on me, both unsettling and grounding at the same time. "You will walk," he said simply. I frowned. "Walk where?" "The elders wish to see you." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver through me. This wasn't just a routine check-in. Kato turned, motioning for me to follow. I hesitated only a second before pushing myself up and trailing after him. Outside, the village was fully alive. Women carried baskets of food, men sharpened weapons, children ran barefoot through the open spaces. But when they saw me, the energy shifted. Conversations dropped to hushed whispers. Eyes followed me. I felt like an intruder. Kato led me to the center of the village, where the elders sat in a semicircle under the shade of a large tree. The same elder who had decided my fate the night before studied me in silence before finally speaking in his deep, authoritative voice. Kato translated. "They want to know why you were in their land." I swallowed, feeling every gaze pinned on me. How could I explain? "I was exploring," I said carefully. "I wasn't looking for trouble." Kato relayed my words. The elder narrowed his eyes. More words were exchanged, and I caught Kato's slight hesitation before he turned to me again. "They say, you may not leave." My blood ran cold. "What?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "You can't keep me here forever." Kato remained calm, but there was something conflicted in his expression. "They fear you will bring others, that if they let you go, more will come." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't about me. This was about them, their survival, their secrecy. I glanced at Kato, desperate. "And you? Do you think I'm a threat?" His lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "I do not know what I think anymore." For some reason, that hit harder than anything else. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting against whatever was growing between us. I stood there, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. The weight of the elder's decision pressed down on me like a stone. I was trapped. A prisoner in a place I didn't understand, surrounded by people who saw me as a threat. Except for him. Kato hadn't moved since he spoke those words. I do not know what I think anymore. They lingered in the air between us, an invisible thread pulling us into a dangerous territory neither of us had asked for. The elders exchanged glances, their decision final. One of them spoke again, and Kato turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You will work," he said. I blinked. "Work? You eat, you stay, you will contribute." His voice was steady, but something flickered in his eyes. A test. They weren't just keeping me here, they were making me one of them. I clenched my jaw. I wanted to argue, to fight, to tell them I wasn't their slave. But what choice did I have? If I resisted, they might decide I was too much of a risk. I needed time to figure out how to escape. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice level. Kato nodded and gestured for me to follow. The village moved around us as we walked, people sneaking glances, whispering. I felt like an animal being watched, studied, judged. But Kato didn't seem to care. He walked with that same controlled confidence, leading me toward the edge of the village, where a group of men were carving wood and weaving materials together. "You will help here," Kato said. One of the older men handed me a tool, motioning toward a pile of half-cut branches. I stared at them, then at Kato. You expect me to build something? I asked. Kato didn't smile, but I swore there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. I expect you to try. I exhaled sharply and crouched down, gripping the tool. The wood was thick, rough under my hands. I worked in silence, feeling the occasional gaze of the villagers on me. Every movement, every failure was being observed. Hours passed, the heat bearing down on me. My muscles ached, sweat dripped down my back. But I didn't stop, because he was watching. Kato never hovered, never interfered, but I felt his presence. Every time I struggled, every time I pushed through, he was there, studying me. And that did something to me. I wasn't just working to survive. I was working to prove something to him. By the time the sun dipped toward the horizon, I was exhausted. My hands were raw, my body sore. The villagers had already begun retreating to their huts, the sound of distant drums signaling the coming night. Kato finally stepped forward. He reached down, gripping my wrist, not hard but firm, his fingers grazing the bruises that had begun to fade. "You did well," he said, his voice quieter now. I swallowed. His touch was warmer than I expected. "I had no choice," I muttered. "You did," he countered. His grip lingered for a second too long before he let go. I should have pulled away first. I should have ignored the way my skin burned where he touched me. But I didn't, because for the first time since I had been captured, I felt something other than fear. And that was even more dangerous than anything else. The night settled over the village, bringing with it the rhythmic beat of distant drums and the hum of voices carried through the thick jungle air. Fires flickered around me, casting long shadows against the huts. My body was exhausted from the day's labor, but my mind wouldn't rest. I sat outside the small hut I had been given, staring at the flames licking the night sky. I wasn't alone. The villagers moved around in their own rhythms, laughing, eating, living. And then there was Kato. He stood across the clearing, speaking in low tones with a group of warriors. His posture was strong, his presence commanding, but his eyes flickered toward me just once before he turned away. I clenched my fists, exhaling. I shouldn't have cared. Shouldn't have let the fact that he had saved me, that he had been the one to look at me differently, burrow into my mind. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake him. A shadow moved beside me. I tensed, but it was only an elderly woman, setting down a wooden bowl filled with some kind of stew. She didn't speak, only gestured for me to eat before disappearing into the night. I wasn't sure if it was a gift or a test. I was about to take a bite when footsteps approached. I knew it was him before I even looked up. Kato stopped in front of me, arms crossed. He studied me for a long moment, then his gaze flickered to the untouched food in my hands. "You do not trust it," he said. It wasn't a question. I sighed, gripping the bowl. "I don't trust much of anything right now." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You should eat. You need strength." I scoffed. "Strength for what? More labor? More waiting around, wondering what's going to happen to me?" Kato didn't react. Instead, he crouched down beside me, his movements controlled. Too close. The firelight flickered against his skin, highlighting the sharp angles of his face. "You are still alive," he said, voice low. "That is more than what could have happened." I met his gaze, heat rising in my chest. "And why is that? Why did you stop them from killing me?" He exhaled slowly. "I do not know." I didn't believe that for a second. A tense silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, and then, without thinking, I said it. "You look at me differently than the others do." Kato's body stiffened. The fire crackled between us, the only sound in the heavy silence. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I saw something there that scared me more than the thought of never leaving this place. Recognition. He knew it too, and instead of answering, instead of denying it, he stood up and walked away, leaving me with my food, my exhaustion, and a truth that I wasn't ready to face. The next day, I woke up with an unfamiliar feeling weighing on my chest. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. I went through the motions, helping with labor, carrying supplies, watching the village move around me as if I wasn't an outsider. But I was an outsider. No matter how much time passed, I would never belong here. And yet every time my eyes met Kato's across the village, every time I caught him watching me when he thought I wouldn't notice, I felt something pulling me deeper into this world. That night, I didn't wait for him to find me. I found him first. He was by the river, kneeling at the water's edge, washing his hands. The moon cast a silver glow over his bare shoulders, highlighting the muscles that flexed with every movement. He must have heard me approaching, but he didn't turn. I stood behind him, unsure of what I was doing, unsure of why I needed to be here. "I want to leave," I said, breaking the silence. Kato stilled. Then slowly he turned his head just enough to glance at me. "Then run." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. A challenge. I swallowed hard. "You know I can't." He finally stood, towering over me. His dark eyes bore into mine, searching for something. For what, I didn't know. "You're afraid," he said. I scoffed. "Of course I am." He took a step closer. "Of them?" I exhaled. "Of you." The words came out before I could stop them. Kato's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. Something that made my breath hitch. His voice was lower when he spoke again. "You should be." The air between us grew thick, charged with something I didn't want to name. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to step back, to break whatever this was before it became real. But I didn't move, and neither did he. It was a mistake. We both knew it. And still, when he reached out, just barely, just enough for his fingertips to graze my wrist, I didn't pull away. The following days were torment. We acted as if nothing had happened, as if that moment by the river had meant nothing. But it had. I felt it in the way he watched me, in the way his body tensed when I was near, in the way my heart betrayed me every damn time he spoke. Then the day came, the day he told me he was going to help me escape. I met him near the edge of the village under the cover of darkness. He had brought supplies, food, water, a small weapon. "This is your chance," he said. "Go." I hesitated. "What about you?" His jaw tightened. "I stay." Something inside me twisted. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant leaving him. I stepped forward, my voice barely above a whisper. "Come with me." Kato exhaled, shaking his head. "I cannot." I hated how much it hurt to hear that. But then, before I could stop myself, before I could think about the consequences, I did the unthinkable. I grabbed his wrist, pulled him close, and I kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, raw, dangerous. For a second, he didn't move. Then, he kissed me back. I felt his hesitation melt, felt the way his fingers gripped my arms, felt the weight of everything. We could never say pour into that single, reckless moment. When we pulled away, he was breathing hard. So was I. "This is a mistake," he whispered. I nodded. "I know." And yet neither of us moved, because it was already too late. The escape wasn't easy. The village discovered my absence too soon. The jungle was relentless, the danger real. But Kato stayed by my side, fighting through it all, And in the end, when we finally reached the edge of civilization, I turned to him, knowing that this was it, the end of us. But then, he surprised me. "I will not go back," he said. "Not without you." I felt my heart stop. "Kato." His lips curled slightly. "We break the rules now, yes?" A slow, disbelieving laugh escaped me. "Yeah, we do." Then, with nothing but the unknown ahead of us, he took my hand, and together we walked toward a future we had stolen for ourselves. Because love like ours wasn't meant to be contained. It was meant to run free.